Welcome to Mel Bolton Associates How to Make a Great Product podcast, where we explore best practices for taking great ideas from napkin sketches to mass production. I'm Stacy Alatsis, Vice President of Public Relations for Mel Bolton Associates. I have with me today Jay Tynan, President of Mel Bolton Associates, and Rob Fluck, a member of the Board of Directors. Today, we are very excited to have with us Andy Nguyen, an expert product manager with 15 years experience at such top companies as Johnson Controls, Tyco, Vizio, ViewSonic, Linksys, Cisco. Today, he'll share with us his vision for how to make a great product and how to tell a great product story. He'll talk about how to keep your team focused on the North Star of the brand and customer experience. So, Andy, can you talk to us a little bit about your mindset for what goes into making a great product?
To create a good product, you would have to have a holistic approach, form, fit, and function. At the end of the day, where you want to make sure the product work really well, have good qualities, ease of use, easy to connect into the whole ecosystem, either at home or at a business, right? So you have to think about how the product is actually work. For a consumer product, you want to make a product that are very simple to use, take it out of the box, easy, connect, with very little instruction required, right? Instruction to get it done, because you want to make sure that anyone can take the product and just use them. You don't need to have to read like 10 pages. So from a product development or product management, you have to think from the get-go. How is that the size of the product? How does that fit on the table, on the counter? What kind of LED need to have? Does it, make a disruption where it's make too much noise, too little noise? So all these you need to have to consider how it's connected to your whole home ecosystem, how it's connected to the network, how it's being used. You want to think of all these little details before you actually bring out a product. You have to create a spec that work and make sure that you communicate to your team, right? So you have an engineering, you have program management, you have finance, you have all these folks that's going to be listening to you in product management, because you are giving them a product that they have to think about, build, and that's going to take between 6-9 months to a year. So they have to figure out how long the lead time, how long what the cost will be, how they're going to go to the market, what instructions need to get it done from the UI perspective. So at the end of the day, you want to think of all the little things that most people don't think about. As a product management, this is your option. This is what you want to have, right? Otherwise, you can leave a lot of holes and a lot of things that it's not making sense for the customer. They pick it up and they're like, what did this product do? And it doesn't work, and they're going to return it. It's a cost for a company, right? At the end of the day, you send it back to the company, and the company have to eat that charge, right? So product managers have to think from ideation all the way up to production and service and customer usage.
Yeah, I fully agree. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, right? You just mentioned a whole list that has to be managed. And it's done. Sometimes there's portions that are done before it's even a real product or even a real project. And then there's managing the whole cross-functional team. I like how you started off, especially when the first things you touched on is that product manager has to think about the out-of-box experience and the user experience, right? These are after sale. 20 years ago, those were important for sure, but they were kind of like I think they had a term at Belkin, it was unexpected delight, and how easy it was to set up. But now you think about product reviews online, the first thing they do is the out-of-box experience, the OBX, the unboxing.
Yes.
And that can make or break, the first impression consumers have of your product, right?
Correct. For a consumer product, you have to think about, okay, if I open this box, how easy for me to remove the item? What plug do I need to, plug it in? Because as you know, some consumer, then they don't know anything about the product. So you want to make sure that the icon's in the right place, the LED send the right message. You don't want to have an LED that red indicate that it's on, but it's not functioning. People, these are intuitive things that they recognize. So it's
Right.
very much, you don't have to recreate everything. Just the industry has a certain standard already. You have to go and search for it.
The psychology of color is
Yes.
very important. Red doesn't mean it's on. It looks like it's broken, right?
Yeah.
A funny thing. My wife just traveled. She got these free packets for electrolytes. She was at a trade show. They handed them out, so she was going to use them. The next morning, she woke up and there's 3 of them they gave her, and one was orange, not color orange, but orange drink. And she's like, "Oh, that sounds great for the morning." And she used it, had melatonin in it, right? He and everybody who had those samples were walking around there like, "I am dying. I took this nighttime." And they said they should not have had an orange drink for a nighttime thing. That's breakfast. Why did you put melatonin in a breakfast fruit? And the people who gave it away, well, it was colored purple. Purple means night. Well, but that's what you're talking about. That psychology of everything. Jay, you probably know a lot about this sort of thing.
Yeah, I just want to relate to something that happened in the past. For a real successful product, it was out there 30 years ago and it's still going strong. We had a launch team, okay, which included the product manager, the manager of the plant where it was going to be manufactured. We had the graphic designer. We had everybody in place, the sales manager, everybody. And we had several launch teams. And that launch was so successful, it doubled volume within the first year, and everybody was extremely happy. But it was one of those rare times where everybody was on the same page, and the success is, part of the reason.
Yeah.
For all that, and so it turned out great. And I've been a consultant outside of the corporate world and also in the corporate world in corporate design, and something like that I think is a little easier and might happen more in corporate design versus a consultant. Because a lot of times they launch your design and then they just say, "Okay, we'll get in touch with you if there's a problem." But I think, you need to include everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
it's just less of a chance of missing something.
And including the industrial designer, the outside designer, when the choice of that LED, that sounds like a factory decision. Red is cheaper, right? And the product manager says good, but they don't run it past industrial design, and they get 200 calls the first day. My thing won't turn on. Is it red? Yeah, it's on. And then they hang up. Those calls cost you money, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think I want to add something to Jay. When the product is successful, because also the quality of the product, and the customer don't have to think about it, and it'll last for a long time. If it's launched and it stay forever in the business, and the customer don't have to say, "Hey, it doesn't break. I'm just going to continue to buying it," because they know that it's working. They know that it's working well because it doesn't cost money out of their pocket. The minute it costs money out of their pocket, guess what happened? They're going to send replacement, and they're going to say, "Hey, you know what? Take all back if you deal business to business," because they see an increase in failure rate. They're going to say, "Hey, we cannot operate in this manner." So at the end of the day, the product has to work really well, and it has to be reliable, right? Part of the form, fit, and function is reliability. So at product launch, so the whole, as you mentioned, the promotion or going to marketing launch, you have to discuss with all the team member from the get-go, on a piece of paper. Hey, this product going to be launching this. I'll give you an example in terms of I did with at Cisco, where this is how they approach a product. So you have a product on your roadmap. If you want to bring it into production or development, first thing is, okay, is this a new product? How much does it cost? Is it meeting the consumer price point in the market? What's the volume we're anticipating? And from starting to 1 month, 6 months, 9 months, where it's going to land in terms of production for the consumer, right? So first is the finance guy. Well, you have the ID, you have the finance guy to know how much it's all going to cost. And then you work with program management to determine the schedule with the engineering, right? And then ID guys will come up with great ID, and they work with industrial designer and kind of mock up the product itself. And they'll go through the early stage, the engineering usually uses prototype, EVT, DVT, PVT. For term is engineering verification test. DVT is the design verification test, right? And design and development at that time. And then PVT is pre-production, and then you have production. And then when you're in a stage of production aspect, right, you will work with your service team, marketing, launch, and all those aspects. And when the product's in, you do a press release to make sure everything is working. Of course, at the same time, I believe in a hand-on approach, because if you can't touch your product, you don't know what it is. The color look green, but you're supposed to look green when it's on, but it's actually turned red. You could have products that are delayed. So that's part of the goal, is to make sure every step. Yeah.
Yeah, you test all your products yourself. You get them
Of
on
course.
your
Of course.
do your own OBX and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. You
All
have
right,
to. You have to have that approach. Otherwise, you know, you leave it to somebody else. You have a worse chance that the product does not going to come the way you want, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I fully agree. So we just talked about all the things that have to get done, right? It's a mess. And a lot of times the success of that product falls squarely on the shoulders of the product manager. So you really are managing all these groups as a product manager without them reporting to you. You have to coax and cajole them, manage their egos, and get people working in the right direction. But let's break this down. Let's start in the beginning. So you want to have a new product. You have some sort of idea. It's just you and your computer and you know, a pen and paper making ideas. How do you start to validate the idea?
So part of, let's say if I'm trying to bring in a new product in a new market, right? So I have to do my research in terms of, hey, what kind of pricing I'm trying to looking for? Is it fit in my product portfolio? Is it a new category? These are the things that we have to look at. But from the approach, assuming that the product is part of my new, the existing category, it's a new product, new features, a new chipset, new implementation on the UI. So I would do is talk to the engineer and say, hey, I want to build this next generation product. What chipset that can be done? I want it to be in this size. So I would talk to the engineer and the ID guys, purchasing, and say, hey, this is the size that I want. This is the product I want, the feature that I want, and I want to have this type of connection on the product. I want to make it easy. So they will go out, do the research from the engineering, how feasible it is to design it, right? And come back with the feedback. What's it cost from procurement, right? And procurements have to go talk to several suppliers. If you don't have in-house engineering, then we have to go to contract manufacturer, talk about that, right? And then they say, okay, they'll come back with this features, and we might negotiate. They'll take some feature off. I say insist that some feature need to be on, right? And I work with finance. And then we need, part of the reason for finance is we have to build in the margin to sell the product. We can't sell at a loss.
And
right?
a lot of things doing margin, right?
Right.
You know, I've seen some pretty simple margin stacks where it's just this is the cost that I buy it for, right?
Correct.
I don't know how much it costs me to get it here. It's they don't put in the variables. But what they do is they just take like a peanut butter spread and they'll say, look, I'm just gonna margin this up. If this costs me, you know, $1, and I really don't know how much it's gonna cost to bring it in and the variables, I'm gonna margin it up and assume a street price of 4 times that. So it's gonna sell for $4 or even $4.99, $5. And then they just hope that covers everything. I've also seen companies, I've worked at companies where we have everything figured out. There's a variable cost for everything. There's returns is built in, tech support is built in, shipping is built in, licensing, all of these things, they all get margined up. And every month, if you have a good finance department, every single month they give you a report and it shows you how close you are to your variance. And if you keep trending above your variance, well, you better go figure out how to solve that problem or raise your price or something.
Correct. I think partly is an efficient company. They can do that. They have the finance that is super detailed in terms of understanding from the very beginning, how much it costs for the product, each iteration of units, what costs for customer service, as you mentioned, right? Shipping, return, as well as tracking for logistic coming into the country. What's the duty rate and all the aspects? The finance guy has all that information. They need you to plug it in, and based upon historical data, right? They can plug it in terms of, hey, every consumer call me, it's going to cost me X amount of dollar. Every time they send it back to me, it's going to cost me X amount of dollars to, whether it's a product that is okay or it's in failure rate, it doesn't matter. It's going to cost X amount. So if you keep doing this multiple times, we have a loss. So the more the product is not reliable or not working well, then you're
down.
Correct.
They never give you credit though when it comes back down. Let's
Well,
say for every product.
To all that earlier, I'm sorry. In addition to all that, a lot of times when you're getting the pricing and the financing, all the figures together, and then they have an idea of what they could conceivably sell it for in the market, you might take away some things or adjust according to what the final cost will be. And that happens before the release, obviously.
Of course.
But there are always adjustments, revisions, adjustments. Take this away, add this, don't do this. That's all part of the series of adjustments.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there is always revision in terms of where we need to work with finance, right? At the end of the day, as well as every other team, to make sure that all of us in the line in terms of this, the product cost, the feature correct, all the stuff. So as Rob mentioned earlier, how do we keep everybody happy? I think we focus where everyone focus in the same direction, the same North Star, right? Because we have a deadline that we need to do. We need to get everything on time. There is a buffer here and there, but the goal is to make sure every member of the team, from finance to development to creation to service, they have their own time to test it out, validate as well. Each member is super important. You cannot discount anyone, even content creation guys, packaging guys, development guys. Everybody have to have their knowledge, and that's why it's make a good product. You incorporate everybody need, because they are specialized in their field, right? You're the coach, and that's, as I see as product management, it's like a coach. You gotta guide them along the way, coach them along the way. You can't really get upset with them because they are in focus of their mindset of their development, right? Go ahead.
So it sounds like we have similar experiences here across the board. There's you work with your team to figure out what's feasible. Based on a lot of secondary research, you look at your competition. What do they cost? What are they offering? Can I produce something better? And then you check if you can make it for a reasonable cost. And only then do you start to move from secondary to primary research. Before you can bring in those creative guys, you got to make a product story. So now you're like, okay, I think I have a chance to make something at a price point that will sell. What's my product story? How am I going to be better? And how am I going to work with these creative guys to tell that story in imagery and video? Correct. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, the product you bring in has to be exceeding the current product in so many ways, right? You want to create a good story where it's, hey, I'm going to build this product that is very easy to connect. You can use the phone to connect with the app. And it's very simple. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be simple from that approach. Everyone's going to like it, from, the kids all the way up to my grandmother. They should be able to use this product, at the end of the day. So it's going to be very simple, easy to install, easy to service, right? You have to make sure that you address the product in the space that you're going in. For case in point, a computer monitor, right? I'm going to build this high-end computer monitor with high refresh rate, very quick time and response at a high resolution, where at the end of the day, it has to have a nice ID, right? It's very minimal. When it put it on the table, it looked like as though it's like a spaceship. It has to encompass the space look in a gaming design, right? I don't want to put a really clunky piece on the desk and call it gaming, right? It won't look good. So you have to approach that. Hey, it's a gaming product, going to have the Sun style ID. It's going to be slick, easy to mount, easy to install, and you plug and play, right? From that perspective.
Yeah. Let's spend a minute drilling down on that, because I think you just laid out what it's all about, right? So you talked about refresh rate and a bunch of specs that there are many people, especially online, people will do specmanship to sell their product. And
Correct.
people who are really good at gaming know what refresh rate means.
Right.
But you may be trying to also sell to people that don't know what refresh rate means,
Right.
or you may want to be, it's best to communicate to them the benefits first. So refresh rate, correct me if I'm wrong here, when you're making a monitor, refresh rate means your picture is as up to date as it possibly can be on that screen in gaming, right? You don't have to wait another 10 nanoseconds. You got your picture 10 nanoseconds sooner than the other guy. And in a game,
right, it's latency, right? You want to have as fast as possible. The minute you playing a game, it should instantly work on it, and there's no lagging in terms of pictures and stuff like that. So as a first person shooter, it should be very quick. Yes.
Yeah, in a game where everything relies on reaction time,
correct.
Every nanosecond that your monitor chews up is a nanosecond where you're responding too late. So what does that result in, right? It's not the refresh rate that they want. They want higher scores, more
right.
kills, whatever.
Right.
So you might be, and this is, let me try and think of a better example. We can stay with video games, but you may be selling something, a video screen that's optimized for a racing game. All right. Fastest you could say better lap times, right? You're going to get better lap times. And they're like, how am I going to get better lap times? And then you can get into the story of refresh rate.
Right. And then, from the gaming perspective, yes, you can create that as well for also regular consumer, right? What's the feature and benefit? It's easy for them to use. They don't have to do a whole lot. The function in terms of reliabilities, the ergonomic of it, the
contrast and things
contrast
like
and ease of the eyes, so all those aspects where it benefit the consumer at the end of the day.
So you basically want to come up with something that's a promise to the customer that means something to them as a person in their whatever role they want. Faster lap times, less eye strain for someone who's working at the office.
Yep.
And then you want to get into the specs that tell you, so maybe you said less eye strain. You're like, our contrast is adjusted and our color brightness is adjusted, and we block some blue, and we look at the ambient lighting, and we can make a screen that's less harmful, less taxing on your eyes, right?
Right. Yeah. So you will provide all the features and the description. How the blue light help your eye reduce eye strain, right? The ergonomic is easy for you to put on a desktop mounting, moving back and forth. So all these aspects you have to describe to the consumer. So when they read it, they know exactly what they're going to get, what benefit from it, right? Part of that story is that, hey, you buy this stuff. This is all the features that benefit you, where for your daily working and gaming, you will see this benefit when you have this product. And that's just display, right? Wireless routers are slightly different. Every product has its own niche for that particular customer, right? You have to write the story, as you mentioned, so to provide a good description what it does and then doesn't do. Not really in terms of doesn't do, but it's what it can do for
you want to make a promise to the customer and then tell them why you're going to make that promise come true, basically.
Correct. Yeah.
And then with that promise, Jay, then industrial design takes that, and they can tell any story you want, right? If it's a gaming story, you're going to get faster lap times. You could, you want to dig into that, Jay, and tell us more about how you would approach that from industrial design.
Well, a lot of times you'll have a product line, that is based on the initial product, and you'll have different performance levels for each one of the products in the line. And basically the design can also emphasize whether it's more of a performance emphasis than, you select color, graphics, what have you, to really paint that picture for the consumer. So they're probably going to be looking, say you have 3 headphones, and they might be looking for one of the 3 based on how they use it. Well, you have to design it accordingly. And you can. I think a designer also does research. It's not like he just puts his mark on it. You have to look at the competition. You have to have a real feel of what's out there and how it'll fit. So
totally, I agree. I agree with Jay completely. At the end of the day, a product doesn't matter what is a headphone or display, whatever it is. The designer actually has a feel how the product look. They'll go into a particular consumer store, or and they're like, hey, these products have this kind of design, and then they will come back and kind of think about their idea what good product should be, right? It's not interfere or copy someone else, right? And then how it fit under their, everybody interpretation of fitting, form, and function is slightly different, but at the end of the day, the designer will try to incorporate as much as possible where everything will feel natural, will look as though you have a quality product in your hand, right? Not some cheap stuff. So the industrial designer as well as graphic designer, these are the things that they kind of looked at the end of the day. So like I said early on, each individual will bring the expertise to bring the product to life, right? Not just one person can do it by itself.
Yeah, you make a good point. The graphic designer, product design is one part of how you get to draw attention to the consumer, but the packaging is another part of that. And so it's all part of the equation. You want to draw the customer to your product based on what you designed it to be in terms of internally, performance, everything. And packaging has a big impact on that.
Yes,
we know.
If you're selling on shelf, if you're selling on shelf in a B2C environment, unless your brand is so well known that they came to buy your brand, if they're walking into a section and they've got 3 brands there from which to choose, your package is the only thing you have at that last minute to sell it. Certainly it helps if you could throw a QRC code on there. They could go to reviews and things like that, but that's part of the package, right? You have to think about that.
Yeah, part of the packaging, part of placement on the shelf. So I mean, we can drill down in each segment of the product development, in depth if you want to in the future. But yeah, I mean, these are highlight of how you want to touch up each of the product development, right? And because it has multiple stages. It's not just, hey, I want a product and just go and sell it. This is the price. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot of thinking behind it, a lot of thoughts to say, hey, is this product actually going to sell, right? You know, product management, maybe they, out of their mind, they think, hey, it's a great product, but it goes to the market and it just flops.
Let me ask you this. So now that in this scenario that we're talking about, you've done all the research, you've walked it through it with engineering. Is it feasible to make these things, use this chipset with these features? You've walked through it with finance. Yeah, we can sell it for that price. You've worked on your market research and you've come up with a promise that you think customers are going to resonate with. Now you're doing your research, and we're not going to go into all the different ways to do research. Everyone has their way. There's many great ways, but there are 2 things a product manager has to worry about, in my opinion. And I'd like to hear how you manage these things. At each end, there is, well, the consumer says this, so right? And some product managers fall into the trap of, well, if the consumer says he wants exactly this, I'm going to give him exactly this, even though you think that that's not a good idea, right? And then some product managers have confirmation bias, and they're like, well, it didn't resonate with my idea. They didn't like my idea. They must be idiots. I'm not going to listen to them. I know better than. How do you balance in between there? And specifically, are you aware of which one you tend to stray towards? Like, that's your fault. You're like, I always, whenever I err, I tend to err on this list. So take us through that for you.
So good point. So, product management has their own idea of how to design the product or bring in the product. You have consumer that has comments and say, hey, I want to have this. So you have to take your ego out of the box. You can't assume that you know everything. There are a lot of consumer out there has a particular need. So you have to incorporate their need and how to get that need or that wish to be on the product. Does that make sense? Does the price point make sense or not? You have to incorporate everything together. Customer voice of the customer is super important, because at the end of the day, they're the one that purchase the product, not you. You can build the product. If they don't buy it, you're not going to go anywhere. So you have to incorporate both the experience as a product manager, how it works or what features need. The basic features going to be there, right? And the consumer wants something. You think, okay, can I incorporate the feature they want, the function that they want? Sometimes they don't even know what they want. But you have to think about what is actually the right fit, the right form, the right function. Does that make sense? The right cost. You have to incorporate all these items in place before you build the product. And then you build a prototype and say, hey, test it out with a certain consumer base, right? And they'll give you that feedback. You don't have to go develop a product on your own in a silo. There's a lot of consumer willing to test it out. Everybody is slightly different. You get those feedback and they're like, hey, this prototype is crap. It doesn't fit the way I think it is. Or, a different user from a male, they're completely different. So you have to incorporate everything. You have sometimes put your feeling aside and make sure you build a good product that worked really well.
Do you have an example or a story that you can remember, a product you can remember where as a team, you guys erred one way or the other, and you didn't ask consumers and you went and it sold and it died, or you didn't ask consumers, you just felt you knew it and took off, or the other way? We did exactly what they wanted, it still did. So do you have any of those that you can remember?
Yeah, on the early on when we built, when I work with Monitor, CRT, where you have audio on the side, right? And the audio from a 17-inch looked really great design. It just kind of come out with it's like a speaker on the side. It sounds fantastic. So when you want to move the product up to a 19 or 21 inch at that time, CRT is very difficult. It becomes so bulky. It just looked like a balloon. So we're thinking, okay, let's go down on the base. We'll create a base that it just elevated up, 2 inches, put a bass and speaker. And I thought it was a great idea. And a few people was like, that looked kind of hideous. And I didn't really pay attention to it as much. We built it, right? And it sounds great. And then the problem is that when you think it's so good and everybody, you didn't listen to them, you sent it out to the market and we got terrible review. It's some people, because as a product person, you don't test everything at a full load, because we didn't turn on the speaker at maximum. When you do that, because the speaker on the bottom or the base, it has a magnet. So it's disrupt the CRT. So it doesn't look good because you have a...
And that made it to market?
It made it to market because we had test limited product at that time. We didn't sell very much because it's a very large size, it's expensive, but we did launch it and it didn't last very long. So I learned from that, it's like, you gotta sometimes take a step back and just don't bring in crappy product, and you gotta cut your loss,
That's horrible. Your QA team should have caught that. Certainly. I fully 100% agree with you. You got to test your own product, but testing on your desk while other people are at work,
exactly,
you're not in a situation where you can crank that up.
Well,
that's
exactly. So that's what happened. So when you crank it up maximum, it's had vibrating so loudly, and the screen start turning huge, and and then so that's one of the worst, not incorporating customer. At that time, that's also the manufacturing was not really a really well They didn't really know what they were kind of doing. So we're stuck in using a contract manufacturer that has no idea about audio. So it's a hidden, it's a really miss for my part, and I took the full blame. That's the one product I remember. Is like, man, I wish I just never launched it.
That's a great trait, Andy, that you took full blame. From where I'm sitting, that's not your fault, right? For the reason I just, but as a leader, as a product manager, all the mistakes a product manager has to say, that's my fault, right?
Yeah,
and all the successes need to be everybody else's success.
Well,
right?
one thing I want to interject as a product manager, you can have all the data that supports your decisions, but when do you decide to try something different and innovative that hasn't been tested? That's always a risk, but you've got to have some reason for supporting it.
Right, that's called vision, right? You have a vision of where the product is going to go, even though most people don't see it, because in product management long enough, you see the trend, you see things that are a little bit ahead of everybody else, partly because that what chipset is available, what kind of design is available. You got all these contract manufacturing, as well as all the designer out there come to you, and you kind of have a formulated idea what kind of product you have at the end of the day, what vision you have, not only for the 1 year, but 3 and 5 year along the way, part of the roadmap. You have to have a vision of how it's all come together on a product, and you have to take a chance, and you have to, at the end of the day, get the voice of the customer. Like I said, not every customer see their vision because they're so tunnel on what they're doing every day. But as a product manager, you got to take some time to step back and see how your product, you have to visualize where it's going to be heading the next 5 to 10 years, right? Or how does it fit in the whole ecosystem, right? There's new technology coming out. How does that going to fit? Am I going to just build one-off kind of product? So all these things you have to consider. For monitor, it's not so difficult. I think the technology it's readily available, but think about wireless routers, right? Or other device connected to a wireless router. It has to be working really well, because your wireless router it's working on a particular frequency. All the wireless device have to work, and it has new wireless device coming out all the time. Compatibility is a big issue. So you have to consider, okay, what other device kind of connected to it, or how does it work in the whole ecosystem? Am I the one to provide the whole ecosystem, or am I the device just connected to the ecosystem? So you have to think from that whole holistic approach on designing a product.
That reminds me of a conversation saying that consumers can't always look forward, and that's your point, Jay. The consumers can't always see in the future. I was talking to Rick Jung of Zero Design. You guys both know him, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And he told me that he's frustrated when the executive staff goes and takes it to the lunchroom and asks people what they like. He's like, you know what? We're with Zero Design. We are and they're a great designer. They've done great. I've done great work with them. They are a great design team. He said, this is what I do. What's the guy in the lunchroom know that I don't? He said, if you leave it to those guys, right? If you leave it to the public, any public, in any lunchroom, anywhere in the world, if you leave it to the public, they will tell you the one that reminds them of the cool one they like today. And if you think about that, from my point of view, the one that was done today started development at least a year ago, probably 2 years ago. Sometimes it was a twinkle in the product manager's eyes 5 years ago because he was waiting for a chipset or something like that. So they're looking 5 years in the past. And a guy who was at Ford, he told me once, a good design that comes out, when a car that's going to be iconic comes out, at first you look at it and you're like, ew, what's that, brother? Ew, But then it grows on you, and that becomes the one that sets the path.
Right. I used to hate that. I used to hate it when they go to people who, how many are they going to buy? On top of that, I mean, are they the consumer? No, they're the producer or the marketer or the sales. So whenever you have a focus group study of any type, you have to do your homework and make sure They are potential consumers, but I used to hate that. It's like, no, don't do that. And you know what? It seems like most of the time they would go with the opinion of guys in the lunchroom, and it's like, no, don't.
We did that once at one of my companies, and it dated the product immediately. People were like, "Get that out! That looks old." We couldn't sell it into. We were selling to hotels, and immediately they said that looks dated. Anyway, so
Good.
Sorry, this is we're supposed to
No, it is not. You're right. You're absolutely correct. At the end of the day, the guys in the lunchroom, they only think what is in front of them. They have not thought about all the usage, right? They only think about a couple of things that is being on that product that they will use. They don't think about all the connectivities, how it's fit, how it's on their hands. Like, oh, that colors look ugly, and then this is too bulky, right? And that because they only see one point of view. But as a product manager, you have to think of many views to incorporate, right? So
going back to that hypothetical I put up, or the bounds on that question, how do you avoid doing what the consumer wants just because the consumer said it? How do you give him what he needs rather than what he wants? And how do you avoid your own confirmation bias? I say this all the time. It came from Henry Ford when they asked him, why didn't you ask customers about this? Why didn't you get, he said, if I asked them, they would have just told me faster horses, right? So I just built what I wanted. I think that's a great quote.
Yes.
But I think it also, I've made up my own to add to that. It's great that he did the right thing. He's Henry Ford. He's an icon. Not all of us are Henry Ford. Not all of us can have that vision.
Right.
But as a professional product manager, instead of asking what you want, or when they say what I want is a faster horse, if you ask them why, then you can start getting down to the good design, because their answer is going to be, I want to get to town faster. I want to plow my field faster. And he goes, oh, you don't want a faster horse. You want to get to town faster. You want to plow your field faster. I can help you with that, right? So,
right. At the end of the day, you address the customer need, right? So what do they want, right? At the end of the day. So that's why you have to incorporate their feedback, and then you have to kind of dissect a little bit what exactly their meaning behind it, and how nowadays, because of the technology of the internet, you can search for anything. Everything is standardized, so it's not you're not working in the corner by yourself. So there's a lot of studies and a lot of stuff. You kind of incorporate what they say. Okay, that makes sense. This product fit really well, or everything is kind of available to you, and you kind of, through the experience that we have, we kind of know how to navigate the right product, right? Not going to pick a crappy one anymore, right? Or develop a crappy one anymore. Yeah. I'm hoping.
What do you think about doing product research with AI? And let me box that. So I talked to a company, they really successful company, but just recently we were talking, and I've learned that they were asking AI to make the roadmap for them, just generative ChatGPT AI. And I've done that in the past, not with the intent of doing exactly what AI said, but sometimes you're working on your own and you need an opinion and you're working late or something. The only one you have to talk to is AI. So I've done that. What's your opinion on that? How do you think that?
From my perspective, AI is it's a tool to collect data and present itself, but it has no creative idea, right? It's just here it is. I searched the entire world. These are some of the idea from everybody, and I think that you like it. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah. But I think it doesn't know what I think. It show what the general consensus out there, what is being put out by the industry.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
At the end of the day, if you want to be different, you have to take a step back and think about what you really want on the product, right? And how it's going to be better for the consumer, not the same. Because if you want everything the same, there's no point of developing product, because you have to differentiate yourself from everybody else, where you have to build product that will work better. Might not have the same feature, completely different, but it still work, because we love aesthetic. We love things that feel good, it has a certain performance that we want to have, not generic to where everybody want to have. AI will give you a generic, very much that's it. And it's not there to think for you. It's only there to gather information and spit it out, regurgitate everything for you.
Stacy, you have some experience with this that is analogous. It's not exactly the same thing, but you're a writer. And you have asked AI, you've told me stories how to write something, it came back and you're like, well, it's not that great. But you've come up with ways to get the most out of AI in creative processes. Can you share a little bit of that?
Yeah, well, you just have to keep asking more specific questions, and when it comes back with something and where it sounds too simplistic or the language is too flowery, then you have to go back and say, now try this again, but I want the language to be more straightforward. Or I want you to write this as if you are a romance novelist, or I want you to write this as if you are a fantasy novelist. Mm-hmm. And even still, it's not, and I love what Andy said, where the AI is not creative. It's just banking on the creativity that's from people already who've produced things, and it's like, this is what I found. And mostly I end up using it as sort of inspiration. I'm like, okay, I see the seed of where you're going with that, and I can kind of adopt that and adapt that. And I adapt everything, whatever it gives me back, I write through all of it, but it gets it done faster. When you get stuck, it gets you over the hump with, here are 10 different ways you could go with it. And then you're like, oh, and then your own creativity gets clicking and you're like, okay, and now I'm a lot farther along than I would have been if I just sat here mulling about this myself.
The creative filter.
Go ahead, Jake. Sorry.
I was just going to say, the creative filter. You have all this data, and then it's how you use it, and that's where creativity comes in.
Yeah.
And good results.
I use it to help me with product pages. Do you do that, Andy, ever?
Yeah. No, it's just exactly what Stacy was saying. I would put in question and rewrite it. I could re-ask multiple times until it come where I can take tidbit to where it makes sense to me, because otherwise it just kind of like very bland, or it doesn't really address what you really need. And then when you read it, certain paragraph is so flowery, it's like, it doesn't make sense. So it's a starting point, but then you have to put in your own spin of what you want to have on there, right? It's resonate with people that actually read the product, right? Human being, that when they read it, they know that someone actually write it, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just like.
So I developed, when I was doing product pages, I developed this template where I'd put in all these things to get it familiar with the product. And I can say, the AI can help you do something faster, or it can help you do something better, but it can't do both. It's never going to be faster and better. When I did better, I put in a lot more work than I would put in just shooting it out myself. And when I did faster, it wasn't even as good, but I got it done and threw it up there. Yeah. So
it's a tool. You have to realize it's a tool that can help us to get there a little bit faster. And you have to put in your spin, because each of us has a different perspective on designing a product or building a product, right? At the end of the day, Jay can say, hey, can you come up with a wireless router without, only with 2 antennas? And it'll probably come up with something that's super simple, slick. Maybe it's rectangle all the way, very long, and 2 antenna dipole at the end, right? And it'll give you different stuff until you kind of narrow it down, but it has to be your idea what you want to have, right? So it just kind of provide some creation for you as an initial idea, but it cannot, go into a full production of your product at the end of the day. So
yeah, I use ChatGPT all the time to bounce ideas off of, but I never take. You can't count on it for creativity. So let's go back to getting those products through, right? You've worked out all this work in the beginning, secondary research. You've done some primary research. You've guarded yourself against making mistakes on that research. You've shared it with everybody. You've got a North Star you're going to drive everyone to. What's your methodology? Whether it's well structured or loose, for keeping the whole team driving towards that date and that North Star of the product promise and telling that product story. How do you do that? How do you manage such a big team?
Well, so if you work for a company and have program manager, you work with the program manager, so they manage that aspect. But if you kind of like work as a product manager and a program manager, so you need to know what's the next task that's going to be taking place for the next couple of weeks, right? So you will create a meeting with the team, say, address, hey, are you working on this? What's the status? You will have to work with them on a weekly communication in terms of status update and where they are having pitfall, right? Hey, are we meeting the schedule? What are the hiccup? Is there, and if they come back and say, hey, I have a hiccup, I can't do this with this particular time. And then you ask them, what's the reason, right? Is that because of resource or money? Then you will, formulate a plan. You can work with them. Can you push out the schedule, or we need to work with management to bring in more resource to get it done, right? So you have to have a status update once a week. Once or twice a week. And then at the end of the day, you can also, it doesn't have to be only once a week you give you that update. It's a constant communication, a constant flow between, if they have a problem, they let you know right away, then you can solve the problem, right? It's once a week is for everybody to be aware where everybody need to be at, right? It's on the same expectation, deliverable, the cost, make sure everybody is aware so we don't miss a step from it, right? The right expectation from it. So that's how I would manage the team, right? And if they have an issue, they'll come to me directly, or I would say, we'll have a scheduled meeting. If I can't solve it, we'll escalate it up to management and say, hey, here's the issue. We need resource. We need, more capital to get it done because, to meet the schedule. So it depends on what we're trying to address at the, core meeting, right? The people call it, core meeting or status meeting, one way or the other. So that's how I would do it.
That's a great way to do it, to have constant communication, and it gives people more of an opportunity to contribute. And if they have an opportunity to contribute, it'll be more of, something they feel they worked on and will support.
Correct.
Like, they listen to me and I'm going to support it. I'm going to do what I can to make that a successful conclusion. So getting their feedback, even if it's not always accepted or part of the final equation, they feel like they participated. And you do need a lot of support for a product to actually be made, to spend the money and the tooling and the branding and the marketing and,
Yeah. And I would say that as a product management or a program manager, however you want to call it, or you have to take it as a product. Don't take it personal. You build the product together as a team, because we're going to be on, our name's going to be on it one way, that it's good or bad. Your name's going to be attached to this particular product, right?
What's the saying? Success has many fathers, but failure's an orphan, right? Well, never in a product company, it's never an orphan. It's always the product manager, right?
Yeah.
No matter what.
And you have to treat it as a product. There's no person involvement there. I'm not attacking anyone. We all, from my perspective, always approach it from a product approach. Hey, how does the product work? Can you do it? This is what I'm thinking, right? I'm never gonna tell you, hey, you don't know what you're doing, or you're not pulling your weight. I would never say that to any of my colleagues. Doesn't matter what you do, how can we get better at it, or what can we do to make it work? We'll all have different different understanding about things. We can work together. That's part of the communication. Is otherwise I can ask one thing and they don't know, they go sideways, and then you can't make the schedule back at all. Then you're really in big trouble. And if your product are 10 to 20 million annual, part of the portfolio, you're in big trouble. So you have to work as a team.
I've worked with you before, right? So I know you're telling the truth there. You are not one to go around and throw people under the bus. But also, you can hear it in the way you talk. Just in this conversation, when Andy talks, he's saying, "How do we do this? How do we do this? How do we do this?" There's never you, and that's just not just that he's coached himself to say we, because there's some people who say we, but you know they mean you, right? They're looking at you like, "How did we screw up here?" Right? But you are great, absolutely great at truly being a team leader, right? You're like, this is us. We are all having a problem on this thing. Let's fix this together, right? So, yeah, I think what you're saying is spot on.
I approached it like a long time ago, right? In product management, you have to work together as a team, because at the end of the day, you need their help, they need your help. We have to come together, because you're going to work so many products, and if you're in a bad, not in a good atmosphere in together, it's going to make them feel uncomfortable. They're not going to come to you when they have problem. They're going to put stuff under the rug, and by the time you find out, oh, you're not going to be happy, and then it just make everything worse. And then your management is going to say, how come you did not know it? And you're like, because you can't blame the guy, because he's afraid of you, or however that may be. So it's an open dialogue. As a product manager, you got to take initiative and accountability. Hey, it's okay. I mean, we all make mistakes, and we can learn from our mistakes. So that's how I approach from it. And then you got to have fun. I mean, that's the key. You got to have fun too in product management or development, because otherwise, man, it's life is miserable.
I remember the first day you walked into product management department when we worked together, and just immediately, things got happier there. You have this little glow to you. I'm not trying to, shine you up too much here, but it's true. There are certain people, I've worked with a lot of people like this. They walk into the room, all of a sudden the room is a little bit more fun to work in, And Andy's one of those guys. Does that always work out to your benefit, or are there times where that can cause problem? Where
it depends on the people on the other end, right? They can see my energies and stuff like that, where I'm open. You ask, I will share. I'm not the one that would keep any secret. If I know anything, I'll share with you, because other people feel threatened. It's like, why is this guy's happy? I don't know how to respond to their not understanding. It's I can only know about myself. As you know, Rob, you ask me stuff, I'll share. I mean, I'll share anything you want to know, my experience. There's nothing to hide. People, the more we share, the more we can learn from one another, and the more we can grow, right? I mean, you have a lot of good experience. Actually, I remember you mentioned where you had to design a user guide, and the design was super simple, right? I mean, it's very intuitive, and I loved it. I mean, it's like we should use for everything, right? So this is how collaboration between colleagues of product management, as well as content guys or user guides guy, you have to share. And then, because like I said earlier, each of us are very unique, and we have our own experience how we like certain thing, and incorporate the best out of everything. It's the way to go for a product, from actual product to instruction to service to everything else. So so I don't know how to answer how other people feel. I don't know. I just know who I am, and I'm I just like to have fun. It might come across as really bad. I don't know.
So let me ask you this. Obviously, you use that positive attitude to manage the team, right? And we've been kind of hinting around that. So you listed out all the things. You have to have a weekly meeting. You can't be pointing fingers, but having a positive culture really does affect how people show up to work, right? And I imagine in all your programs, very positive culture there.
Most of them, yes. Most. You have certain people that are come into the status meeting, and sometimes they're not as positive, and they sometimes pick on you, and you have to say, okay, what do you have question on, or what are your concern? I can address it, and then I would have an open forum, or you say, hey, do you want to discuss, privately? Let me know. We can work either way. I mean, you have to let them figure out what they want to do. It could be that day they had a lot of stuff that bugged the crap out of them, right? At the end of the day. So you have to kind of help them and help them sort themselves out at the end of the day. Sometimes they're got in a fight or getting with their brothers, or traffic is really terrible. People will take that into the meeting, and it's like, I hate that. I've seen that. And then I just sitting back. Okay, so then you have to ask, what are you hating?
Yeah.
It happened, so
Yeah.
you just have to kind of work with them. I mean, it's not their fault. I mean, just one of those days, right?
Well, I think in today's world, with not everybody coming into the office every day, I think the weekly meetings are even more important, just to continue to get feedback.
Of course. Yeah. It's harder though.
I mean, once a week, twice a week. Now, I think that's going to change eventually, but for right now, it must be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It is because you do not see other people reaction, right? It's very difficult. So as we're talking, I can see all of you guys, but sometimes there are only one or two person you can see on the screen, and the interaction behind the scene is really not there, and you don't know whether they're really thinking about the same thing, or they just like whatever, and they'll let you talk. Right?
Folding their laundry while you're talking to them, or whatever. I
watching somebody else podcast.
Yeah, exactly. It's weird as we have transitioned into this, this work from home environment, because we're going through culture as it forms.
Yep.
Previously you show up to work unless you're sick, right? And now it's, people have to work from home half the time, and these video conferences, we're creating culture now on what's appropriate. And I really hope that in the end, the culture becomes, yeah, you're working at home, but you got to turn on the video when you're calling from home, because I need to know that you're paying attention to me. I'll work around it. I'm not going to say I don't want to work with that person because they have it off or anything like that. Maybe it's appropriate for them to have it off. Like in our call right now, the guy producing our video, his is off, but that's appropriate, right? But I've worked at companies where there are whole departments where I never saw their face, and I swear to God, this is a true story. I'm not making this up, and I'm not exaggerating at all. I was working for a company for, it's got to have been 6 months, and I passed someone in the hall, and they said, "Hi, Rob." I'm like, "Oh, hi. Do I know you?" No, I didn't have my glasses on, but I'm pretty good without my glasses. I would recognize any one of you without my glasses, right? And they said, "Oh, you don't recognize me? I'm so-and-so." I'm like, "Really? Oh, no, I'm sorry." She goes, "Why don't you recognize me?" I have never seen you before in my life, right? Because I'd only been on conference calls where she had her video off. So, and that's an absolutely true story.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I've seen that before, and it's puzzling, right? But yeah.
So when it comes to culture, and I may be putting you on the spot here, but I'd like you to think back on the companies at which you knew that your team was going to be successful every time. You might have had a failure here and there, but you had a good on-base percentage. And then the companies that were slumping. When you look at those two groups, right, the ones at the end, do you find a correlation between company culture and product performance, or no?
Oh, for sure. I think when you have a good company culture, right, everyone work together cohesively, have good chemistry, they get product out much better. If you have a certain product management style that are, I would say, cohesive, it make it very difficult not only for you, but everybody working, everybody on their toe. And sometimes the product won't work itself out the way you think it should be because you're following instruction that it doesn't make sense, and you kind of let it, you think this is what it's going to be. It never really successful. It might launch, but it won't last very much because it doesn't have your fingerprint on it. And in other words, your care and how the team working together, putting every aspect of it from, UIs working really nice, the design really nice, the user guys working really nice, the graphic on the packaging is great, the web launch is great, versus like you kind of rush and it's like, hey, you do it for me because somebody's, managing to say it this way. You get it out there, but you have so many mistakes because you're not worked under a cohesive and everybody trying to rush around,
Because people
so
aren't
this is
showing up.
many years ago where I work in the company like that, and you can do it, and the worst thing is that the product will come out but reliability is not there. The turn, the turn, people won't stay very long, right? The turnover is high, right? And those year because the style is completely different. This is many years ago, over a decade ago. But
Yeah.
I mean, you got to have a good cohesive team and you work together and you get product and everybody pitch in when something is not working correctly, and it's make more fun and everybody loves it and they're willing to stay a little bit longer, work a little bit harder. It's definitely a good teamwork. Cohesiveness is the best.
When the culture is bad, people aren't showing up to the project. They're showing up to work, and they may be working on a lot of projects. But if the culture is bad, they're not striving for excellence, and
Correct.
it shows up. It shows up in the product, then it shows up in the reviews, then it shows up in sales, then it shows up on the bottom line. So that's
totally.
Manufacturing has moved overseas. I even see product management, as in global product management, developing a core for everyone else. But when, in my experience as an American, when everything was done in America, it was very difficult for an American company to sell into other countries. We were never as good unless you got a true team over there who was more than just a translation team, who took a core technology and instead of telling the same promise that was told in America, told a different promise, still could come, but there may have been a different primary promise for a different market. And I think as things are moving over to China, and they have been for 25 years, right?
Correct.
But now the last bit's moving over. I think that the thing that remains is that regional storytelling. I don't want to say product manager because in the past, a regional product manager was a translator. It's more a regional product marketing, product story thing. And I think, industrial design needs to be almost always specific to the country. Sometimes you can get away with it, but I think we all know
differences.
We all know when we buy a European product in the United States.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think in the world perspective, normally most industrial design are based out of US. So all the product is very US centric, ID design line. Just like you said, the European design is very different because they don't consider many other aspects as we do. You pick up the European designer product, and you're like, oh, it's kind of cool, but it doesn't seem to work exactly the way it need to be because they are, for Germany, they are very centric in certain way, the Italian, the English. We build product for everybody to use. We incorporate the world to use, right? So the US product is very universal in some way, while other country, they're very centric to that country only.
Yeah, I think our importance in that matter is waning though, right? I think as China is making a lot better products and they're selling them to the rest of the world and trying to sell them in the United States, that there won't be an American product pervasive across the world. It will be a Chinese product pervasive across the world. But I think that product story and that industrial design needs to be built in the United States for the United States, right?
Yeah, from that perspective, the design in China, they lack a lot of things. They don't have the usabilities or the understanding of culture, right? I can tell you there a lock that I use at a mall recently in the United States. It's all in Chinese. I press the button. It's when it's unlocked, it's supposed to be green. Freaking thing is turned red, and I don't even know
Exactly.
It's
Color
working.
psychology.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear, it's not that China as a culture
Correct.
do this. It's that they have their own culture.
Right.
And likewise, for a long time, America got away with it because we were leading and there were no other products. Europe, there were products, so we couldn't sell into to Europe very well. Belgium, we had very little market share in Europe. And that's because we all think of colors differently. We think of shapes differently, right?
Yep.
So it's not that China can't do it. It's that no country can do it for the whole world. And you could say America did it, but that's only because there were no other options. And now that there are other options, I think it's clear that no country can do it. And that's what I think,
I hope that somebody sees the podcast and realizes that product management is a real important aspect of the development and maybe bring some more of it back,
right. Or a Chinese
we're
company.
Becoming a service economy, here.
Yes.
And I think that's a vulnerability that we shouldn't have.
Say there's a big ODM in China who wants to penetrate the American market. They realize they can put stuff on Amazon and sell it, but they're wondering why they can't be successful. Well, they need that company, not quite a marketing company, but a company to adapt their idea to the American culture. And I think a guy like you, Andy, could easily, quite honestly, all the great product managers I've worked with could easily be an asset to that, to those companies and set that up. Right.
Yep.
So
I would agree. Cool.
I want to share one more experience. Way back when I worked for Mel Bolt and Associates, the first time we designed a lot of Zenith products. I don't know if you even know what Zenith is, but
yes,
I should say. But I became aware of the foreign change, or I say drifting towards more foreign products. The Japanese would dump TV sets, and what that means into the U.S. Market. And what that means is they'd sell it for less than they should, just to eliminate the competition. And that was the first experience that I had. I was a rookie then, but it was very, very strong in our office. Everybody was realizing what the Japanese were trying to do. They were trying to eliminate competition, and then the price would go back up once, and it worked.
Yeah, it's buying market share. It's like it's truly a one way of doing business. You can only do it if you're a giant gorilla in the world like Sony, right?
Yeah, Sony and Panasonic.
A small company couldn't do it. Joe in his garage can't decide to make ultralight backpacks for backpackers and sell them at a loss, right? He's going to go bankrupt within 3 months. But anybody else, JanSport decides they want to take that over, they'll just dump them. JanSport's probably a horrible example. I don't know what their company's like right now. It might just be a brand. But anyway, you understand my point.
Yeah. There's different way to approach developing a business, right? You can either undercut the competition, taking a loss, but you can't last very long, right? You gotta have really deep pocket. Good business person or company normally will approach from a quality perspective, because not so much pricing, because if you compete in pricing, you're never gonna be successful, because there's always somebody that's gonna undercut you, and they're gonna be cheaper than you. So the approach should always, if good product, good management, good company, it's good quality product, and it will sell by itself. And over time, you build better and better. You don't want to compete with cost, because it go nowhere, and you could lose billions of dollars.
Right, right. And competing at cost takes money out of your competitor's pocket, but if they have bigger pockets than you, you're going to lose.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
So I remember when made in Japan was kind of a negative.
Right.
Like, oh, it's cheap. It's not, that quality of a product. But now it's considered a good product now.
Oh yeah. Well,
it's a gold standard in some way, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You were in your early career when that started. I came in to my career when the Made in Japan had that badge of honor, and I was working for a Japanese company. And at that time, Made in Taiwan was like, oh, Taiwan, they'll never produce anything good. Now, we'd only seen that shift once. Americans didn't realize it shifted from Europe to America because that was so long ago during the Industrial Revolution that, we didn't recognize that. That was before our time. It's ancient history. But then it went to Japan and Germany, right?
Right.
And then it went from Japan and Germany, it starts going to Taiwan, and then China. And then I remember Taiwan is making everything, and people were saying, oh, it'll never go to China. I was in semiconductors at the time. They can't even do surface mount. They can only do through hole. That's semiconductor technology anyway. And it went. And so now I hear people, it's never going to go to India. It's going to India. Trust me. What happens is,
I would say India is I don't know it will really truly kind of go to India because India is known for software development. Actually, the supplier I talked to yesterday, that's why I couldn't have our meeting yesterday. It's one of the suppliers where they have friends, big company, went to India, hardware company, and create factory, but they could not work out the part of the infrastructures as well as many other stuff.
But that's part of my thesis because I was able to watch it a few times. In the beginning, China was known for agriculture.
Yes.
They couldn't manufacture. And they had some pretty messed up ideas in the late 90s about how to run a factory. They had this idea, well, if it's a bad quality, it comes out of the worker's pocket. So then they will be motivated to sell. Well, that check was at the end of the assembly line. So it just motivated them to ship stuff that didn't work, right? And then they got a really bad. So they had to just figure out what quality culture was. And yes, you're right. India has a lot to learn when it comes to manufacturing hardware. They also have a lot to learn in the software. I've worked with
software is much easier.
Yeah, but also they have a very scholastic view of it.
Yep.
Right.
Correct.
Rather than a product, a real product view.
And
but
then
they will overcome it.
I don't know. I beg to differ partly because the infrastructure for all the components, to build manufacturing is very difficult to move the entire, process over.
20 years.
Maybe.
And we're in 20 years.
I'm not going to be working 20 years from now.
Years we'll be having this conversation. We'll be sitting having.
I'll buy you a coffee if it happens.
Yeah, and we'll be saying there is no way that Venezuela is going to be able to keep up with Indian quality, right?
You're right.
It just keeps moving. What happens? What drives it is you come in, you build up the culture. You build up the workforce. Now the whole workforce shows up. They already know what the idea of a quality product looks like because that's their culture. And if you don't know what that means, go to Shenzhen, or when Taipei was like 15, 20 years ago. When you're having dinner conversations, well, we're in the business, but there's a lot of people that can have those conversations about what a quality product is. Yeah. And what happens then is now those workers, they deserve more because they're doing a better product. They want more. Right? I don't want just a house. I mean, an apartment. I want an apartment and a car. I want a house and a car. I want a house and 2 cars. I want a bass boat, right? And then people are like, I don't know if I can afford a bass boat because they're getting that money as part of the product cost.
Yeah.
Everything that those workers own is part of the product cost. You have to pay them enough to buy it, and then it goes somewhere else. So as soon as you see bass boats showing up in the driveways of China,
yeah. I'll keep an eye on that when I do go over there.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
So here's one. I ask a lot of product managers this in my, just when I talk to them. Every product manager has 100 stories about, oh, if they would have just listened to me, we would have made $100 million, right? So I, of course, have those, you have those. But what I tried to do to make myself better is I try and remember the ones where I screwed up, where I didn't do this right. And I'm not talking about necessarily I made a small mistake. It was more of not having that vision that Jay was talking about earlier, you were talking about earlier. And I'll give you mine, and then we'll see if you can remember.
I already shared mine already. Remember the display?
We don't need to hear mine, actually. I was just giving you time to think of one. So
No, but at the end of the day, the mistake that we made, it's only teach us to become better at it, right? It's not to solve completely, but it teaches us, hey, there's flaw in us that we can help and learn from other people, right? As you try not to make the same mistakes. That's all it is. I mean, because if you have perfect product managers, then all the product in the world will be so perfect, right? So so it's a learning experience. Hopefully you learn the mistakes early on in your career versus later on, right?
Yeah.
You should have more experience now, right?
I like to think, though, you can learn from successes too, though.
Oh, for sure.
I did this right. I'm going to try to emulate that the next project.
You don't appreciate those lessons as much, though, do you? You just, you think, oh, it's great, I did it. But it's those hard ones that they're fun to remember and share.
But I think at the end of the day, if you build a good product, when I say good product, from form, fit, and function, and reliability and quality, in any product, it will take you a long way. It doesn't matter what product. Mm-hmm. Once you have that blueprints of form, fit, and function, easy to use, and work with your ecosystem and the environment, good qualities, good price. Doesn't have to be cheap. Good price, the competitive. It'll last. It'll work because people will appreciate good product. The money is for that product is worthwhile, right? They're gonna know your product and they were gonna buy it again, right? For example, Toyota or Honda for that matter. Rob, you love Honda.
Absolutely love Honda.
Yeah. And because of the way it drives, the style, because your preference is that, right? And other people, for me, it's more of a Toyota, right? Not so it's you get a reliable product, reasonable product, right? I mean, that's the base of building a product. It's very simple. It's not crazy and all the features, but that's how it is, right? Product management, there's templates out there. That's what you need to follow, and you can be successful. You can learn along the way who are successful developers, right? In terms of product management, you can look at their product and you can, see how they think, right? How well it works. Honda, very simple. Toyota is very simple. You go in, you turn it on, everything's work, right? You don't have to think twice about it. Where all the function and feature and buttons in place. When you design a product, it got to work similar way where they take it and it work. You don't have to think too much. That's how I see developing product, right? And make sure that it's a good quality product.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Last question. Let's say you could time travel and you go back and you meet yourself as you're going into your first product management job. What advice would you give yourself?
That's a good question. I would say that take time to do the research and be yourself. Just follow your instinct, right? Don't listen to a lot of people. Ask a lot of questions, like why do we do this? Because when you're first starting out, you're green. You don't know your vision yet. You're still very new. So take a look from your management, ask them, hey, why do we do this? Ask questions as much as you can so you can think how to develop yourselves as a product manager, right? So ask questions. Why do we do this? What's the purpose? Does this make sense? Why are we pricing this way? Why do we build so small, not big? You have to ask all these stuff and then kind of, have them partly guide you and just have fun with it at the same time. Don't constrict yourself. Like, I have to make a perfect product at this price. And if it doesn't, then it's not good. No, just have fun with it, and just kind of let your mind explore, really, at the end of the day too, as well. So
yeah, that's excellent. All right. Cool. Anything else from anyone, or should we put together an outro?
No, I think we're good. I thought that was fabulous and interesting, and thank you, Andy, for joining us and sharing all of your great insights into product development. I learned a lot. I think everybody else did too. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time on How to Make a Great Product podcast.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate your time.
Right. Thank you.